Welcome to Pyrography Made Easy. I'm Brenda. In this tutorial episode, we are going to take a closer look at the Northern Shoveler duck artwork that I did. We'll be examining a couple of the textures, and thank you to everybody who left a comment on my community post letting me know which textures they wanted to see. Well, let's get started. The face. Begin by burning in the trace lines. Use a very light hand pressure and keep the burn strokes light in color so that they can easily be covered up or blended into the artwork. We do not want a coloring book effect where everything has a dark border around it. Rub over the area with a pencil eraser to remove any residual graphite. Then switch to a shader pen tip and start blocking in the dark areas around the face. The color along the back of the head is dark and gets gradually lighter as you work your way towards the left. This is a perfect situation for pull-away burn strokes because they start out darker than they end. Begin the stroke on the right edge of the head and pull it towards the left. Lift the pen tip up a short distance from the right edge of the head. Burn a dark line along the outer edge to make sure the edge is crisp and clean. Adding another layer of pull-away strokes will not only darken the area, but it will also smooth out individual burn strokes. You should rotate the board as needed to keep your pen tip in optimal position when working along edges. This helps ensure that you don't accidentally burn past the edge. Be aware that just because I am using a shader pen tip along the border between the white and dark feathers, you do not have to. Instead, a writer pen tip might be easier to use. I am predominantly using uniform strokes and circular motion as my burn methods. The uniform strokes provides nice, smooth color, and the circular motion provides subtle texture. The texture becomes more noticeable in the lighter colored burn areas. I am using a slight zigzag-ish burn stroke in front of the eye area. I am moving my hand in a very slight up and down motion. This produces a texture similar to circular motion, but the burn marks are much smaller. I also touch the pen tip to the wood and pause slightly to create small blotches that are a couple of shades darker than the zigzag-ish burn strokes. In some areas, like the top of the head, I am creating blotches by quickly pressing the pen tip to the wood. Think of it as stippling, but using the flat of the shader to do so. The blotching, the circular motion, and the zigzag-ish burn strokes all have one thing in common. I am using them to create the look or impression of individual feathers. The darkness of the feathers vary depending on how the light strikes them. Using a texture that varies in color replicates how the light is acting. How do I decide which of the three burn strokes to use? That depends on how dark the feathers are. The quick blotching burn stroke produces the lightest colored burn marks, and their size is similar to circular motion. I use this along the bright green area on the face. I use circular motion along the back of the head where the feathers are large and darker. I use the zigzag-ish burn stroke along the front of the face where the feathers are small and dark. With the eye, burn in the pupil and then give the rest of the eye a uniform tan color. Avoid the highlight. Afterwards, reburn around the edges of the eye to give it a slight 3D shape. Then reburn the pupil to a dark brown or black color using a writer pen tip. I did not get that step on video. Also, Burn a thin, dark line around the highlight. Next, darken up the feathers to the left of the eye. You want a lot of contrast between the adjacent feathers and the eye. This will help the eye really stand out. Then resume burning the feathers on the face. I mentioned before that I have 3 burn methods I use on the feathers: circular motion, blotches, and the zigzaggish stroke. Sometimes I will layer 2 or more of them. For example, I might fill an area with blotches and then reburn around the edges of the area using circular motion. Or I might fill an area with circular motion and then add some dark blotches here and there. I didn't want you to think that I only stuck with one type of burn stroke in an area. The face is blocked in, and I've switched to a larger shader pen tip. I am adding another layer of blotches over the head. It darkens up the area and adds a new dimension to the texture. This shader is the J shader by Colwood, and it produces a blotch that is double the size of its little mini version that I was using. I am concentrating the color along the transition zones. This would be areas like the back of the head where the color is really dark and gets gradually lighter. I am also darkening up shadowed areas. I am using a writer pen tip to burn dark dots, dashes, squiggly lines, circular motion, etc., to create a lot of tonal variety and random shapes along the front of the face. I am back to the shader to tone down or reduce the brightness of the pale feathers along the front of the face. Also, I am darkening up a couple more shadow areas. The bill. Begin by using a shader to burn a thick line along the edge of the bill where the color is very dark. I am predominantly using uniform strokes as my burn method, but I also use some circular motion. As needed, rotate the board to keep the pen tip in optimal position when working along edges. Most of the bill is very dark in color, with some small areas of reflected light. Work your way around the bill, blocking in the dark color. Make sure to avoid the areas of reflected light. As I block in the bill, I am mostly using the flat of the shader to burn uniform strokes. This fills the bill with a smooth color. Even though the bill is very dark in color, I do not have the heat set very high on my burner. The heat is set just to the point where I get a very dark tan or a light brown burn result. This means I have to reburn, slow down my hand speed, or do a combination of both to get darker burn results. Lightly burn over the reflected light on the bill. Afterwards, reduce the width of the reflected light along the front edge of the bill, and fine-tune the nearby reflected light. Burn in the gray area using circular motion and the zigzaggish burn stroke. Then resume burning over the areas of reflected light on the bill. Switch to a writer pen tip and burn circular motion along the right side of the gray area. Next, fine-tune the area adjacent to the gray patch on the bill. Then carefully work your way around the bill, fine-tuning the highlights. As I work on this, I am pausing frequently to consult with the reference photo. You too should be consulting with the reference photo often. The ability to create realistic artwork is dependent on seeing the numerous small details of the subject. That is not something I can tell you how to do. Instead, it is something you must practice at to get better with. That said, don't be afraid to deviate from the reference photo. The artwork does not need to be an exact replica. Plus, there are times when you may want or need to make changes. For example, I burned a dark, thin line along the outer edge of the bill. A yellow arrow is pointing to the area. I did this so that it would stand out from the unburned background. The water. I am using a horizontal zigzag motion to burn along a pale vertical line. This keeps the edge of that pale reflection jagged or uneven. To the right of that is fairly uniform color, so I am burning uniform strokes and some circular motion. I chose this area to start because there isn't a lot going on, so I could figure out what burn strokes worked well for the water. Quite truthfully, just about any burn stroke works. Uniform strokes is good for applying a base layer of color. Circular motion is great for reburning to darken up areas and add random texture. Zigzags are wonderful along the lines of reflected highlights to help break up that line, which is what I did along the outer edge of the reflected white breast feathers. One of the features we associate with reflections on water is how the reflection gets broken up. As I got comfortable burning the water, the more I deviated from the reference photo. I incorporated a lot more breaks in the reflected image. When I got to the reflected head, I started using pull-away strokes along the edges of the reflection. Pull-away strokes start darker than they end. I burned pull-away strokes along both edges of the dark area on the reflection. I am working my way around the highlight on the head. I still incorporate zigzags because they are very good at breaking up lines, especially when you are trying to make them do that. I increased the darkness of the water in front of the duck to help the white feathers on the chest stand out. I didn't fill the entire board with water texture. Instead, I burned a small area around the ducks and just their reflections. Here is an image of the entire artwork so that you can see how little of the water I burned in. My predominant burn stroke in this area has been the horizontal zigzag, so I'm burning a line in a back and forth or left-right direction. I'm using the front of the shader, so the lines are pretty thick in width. Since I'm moving my hand very fast as I burn, the color changes a lot. I like to think that this helps create the water texture. You may have noticed that I block in a small new section of the water, and then I rework previous sections. This is nothing more than a habit or style of working versus something that you should imitate. When I block in an area, I tend to keep the color a number of shades lighter than what the final value will be. This makes it easier to make changes if necessary. The darker the burn stroke is, the harder it is to fix or remove it. Once I'm happy with the shape, then it's an easy process of reburning to darken up the color. Another benefit of reburning is that you get more tonal variety in your artwork. I think all pyrography needs a lot of tonal variety to help ensure that it is visually appealing. In addition to darkening up the color during reburns, I also work on distorting the reflected image. I began to think of this process as making abstract artwork that vaguely resembled a duck head. The inset photo in the lower right corner shows how the final reflection looked once I was done burning. I am adding some dark blotches along the reflection of the back of the head. This mimics the texture that was created on the head. After that, it is back to zigzags and pull-away strokes as I continue to create the reflection on the water. I mentioned before that I was purposely distorting the reflected image, so let's talk about what I am doing. Look along the back of the head, and you'll see thin lines that extend the reflection. That is not on the reference photo. Another thing I added were random lines of reflected light. I also incorporated a lot more tonal variety in areas. For example, the dark area on the head has a lot more variety to it than the reference photo does. I am currently reburning over areas on the reflected bill to darken them up. I am using a zigzag burn stroke and moving my hand very slowly. The slow hand movement produces a dark burn result without having to adjust the heat setting on my burner. In fact, I very seldom adjust the heat on my burner. Once I have the unit set to produce a dark tan burn result, I leave the burner alone. From there, I alter how fast or slow I move my hand and use reburning to change the color of the burn results. Well, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you liked it. On my website, Pyrography Made Easy, I have a blog about this artwork. It's not what I would consider a tutorial, but it does have the reference photo, and there are lots of pictures that talk about the creation of the artwork. I will put a link to my website in the description below. Well, thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.